Good to go.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is August Murphy King. I'm the General Manager of the Canadian League of Composers, and that voice you just heard is Joseph Glazier, the Ontario Region Director of the Canadian Music Centre. Welcome to the ninth iteration of our Rivers Workshop series, which are designed to address, as Joseph and I always say, the things we didn't learn in music school. So today, I think we're covering a topic that is prescient not just in the arts, but one might say particularly in the arts. And it's one that we hear a lot of when we've done surveys or reached out to members to say, like, what can we be doing to help you? We get a lot of feedback around this topic. And that, of course, is the topic of mental health. So I'd like to start just by acknowledging that the CMC and the CLC is in Toronto, the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. It is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands, and is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. We thank the Indigenous peoples who share this land with us and allow us to be here as uninvited guests. The Canadian Music Centre was founded in 1959. We were established in the context of violent state policies targeting Indigenous communities, including the potlatch ban, the 60s scoop, and residential schools. These policies were not part of some dark chapter, ended and in the past, as injustice and violence against Indigenous people is ongoing. Acknowledging the land is to acknowledge that the CMC and many legacy arts organizations, including the CLC, have been a part of racist policies that devalue and seek to erase Indigenous cultural expression. We encourage community members to familiarize themselves with the 94 calls to action that were released in 2015 as part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report. And we would also encourage you to follow some of the efforts that the CMC is taking to address these calls by viewing the webpage on our Accountability for Change and Indigenous Advisory Councils, both of which can be found at cmccanada.org. So we are really lucky today to be joined by Dr. Fei Xia from the Al and Malka Green Artists Health Center. I first encountered this organization a number of years ago. They did a presentation at the Soundstreams Composition Workshop. And when Joseph and I were talking about this topic, it immediately sprang to mind that this would be a perfect fit for the topic. So I'll just give you a quick overview about the health center, a quick overview about Dr. Xia, and then I'm going to turn it over because what she has to say is much more interesting than what I have to say. So the Al and Malka Green Artists Health Center is a facility in the Family and Community Medicine program at Toronto Western Hospital. It's equipped with an acoustic studio and movement assessment studio with a sprung floor to aid in diagnosis and treatment. The center is the only clinic of its kind in Canada that specializes in serving the entire artistic community. The center is an integrative outpatient clinic offering complementary care. Clinic services include acupuncture, chiropractic medicine, craniosacral therapy, I hope I said that right, registered massage therapy, naturopathic medicine, physiotherapy, psychotherapy, and shiatsu therapy. The center's team specializes in addressing the specific healthcare needs of artists, providing a holistic approach to health within an evidence-based framework. Our patients include students and staff of post-secondary arts institutions, professional and creative performing artists of all ages. Through the Joy Sand Cinemas Fund, services are subsidized for eligible artists in financial need, so they only pay a small fraction of the cost. As we know, financial barriers are a huge part of this topic, which I'm sure we'll get into. Dr. Fei Xia is a psychotherapist who is passionate about providing OHIP covered group and individual psychotherapy for artists through the ups and downs of their lives and careers. She completed medical training at McMaster University and her residency and fellowship at the University of Toronto. Throughout her medical career, she has looked for ways in which the arts and medicine can enhance each other. Her projects have been presented nationally and awarded at international Health Humanities conferences. Her counseling is based on creating a safe space of mindfulness and self-compassion. She uses modality including CBT, IPT, and AEDP to inform her work. Has a focused interest in helping young and emerging adults who may struggle with worry, self-doubt, and overwhelming emotion. She also has expertise in working with patients who are going through or have survived the experience of cancer. And just before turning it over, if you have questions, I would just ask to pop them into the chat, and we will get to them probably closer to the end of the session rather than interjecting and interrupting. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Xia.
All
right. Thank you, August, for that kind and in-depth introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Shaw, or you can just call me Fei. Everyone calls me Fei. I am very honored to be invited to give this talk on mental health knowledge, tips, things in general that maybe have not been covered in depth in your training. And as requested, I've kind of kept this simple, broad themes and more about focusing on health and promotion and health, illness prevention as opposed to, you know, diagnoses, mental illness, treatment, that kind of thing. So hopefully this can be widely applicable. And also hopefully this is a nice talk with not too much technical terms. So how did this happen? This talk was organized between your associations and the Alan Malka Green Artist Health Center. The website's there. We'll also take a look at it at the end. So again, thank you guys for inviting me. Kind of quickly getting to the content, I have no conflicts of interest to declare. I don't know if some of you caught this earlier. I do have a cat. His name is Whimsy. I love animals. I will be showing photos of cute animals throughout my presentation to lighten the mood a bit. And yes, in terms of why I love working with musicians in particular, I myself am a musician. I played flute at the provincial and national level until I was like end of mid-high school, before I decided to pursue a career in medicine. And also I still like to do lots of modes of art on the side. So I love working with artists, I love working with musicians, and that's kind of why I'm here. So if we can split this workshop into kind of 3 sections, I wanted to introduce to you guys a common understanding of what mental health is, how it can be defined, some facts that you may or may not be aware of. And then the second part is why it matters particularly to musicians and to composers such as yourself. And then the final part, given all this information, how can you access tools on a personal level and also outside of yourself, like online in the community with other professionals. This talk is slightly interactive if you guys don't mind. So we'll just start with kind of a brief check-in. I don't know if you guys have used Poll Everywhere, but basically you can either join from a separate Safari tab with the link on the left upper corner, or you could just whip out your phone and take a photo of the little barcode on the right upper corner, and you can just write like a 1 or 2 word answer on how you're feeling right now. You can try longer phrases, but I think sometimes that just only shows up as like a random 1 or 2 words in the phrase. So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes just to see how everyone's doing, since, you know, we can't really hear from you guys because we're not in the same room. If for whatever reason the poll isn't working, as a backup, we can all just chime in the chat briefly and I can try to read from that too. Oh, there we go. Things are coming in. Well, slightly overwhelmed. Okay. I personally myself am feeling pretty good this week, but it's been a tiring week as well for me. Chaotic. Yeah. I also feel that. Lots of things happening. There was Thanksgiving, and then now there's like the post-Thanksgiving period. Okay. So a variety of different moods, mindsets going on. So that's good to know. We'll keep that in mind. Okay. So first, let's set a definition for what we're talking about. What is mental health? If you think about like a formal definition, according to WHO, like the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well and work well, contribute to their community. It is a basic human right, and it is more than the absence of mental disorder. So that seems kind of both simple and also abstract. But that is the formal definition according to the World Health Organization. Given this definition, We go to the next question, which is kind of a bit of a gauge. How would you rate your understanding of your mental health based on kind of that definition? So this one's multiple choice, so you don't have to write anything. You just choose a option. Okay. So I think we've got some responses, and most of them, thankfully, just not that, just ignore it and never think about it. But you guys try to address it. You feel like you've got a decent grasp. Some of you even feel like you're on top of it. So that's great. Hopefully, this presentation will just be kind of like a review for you, maybe some extra tips. So that's awesome. I'm really glad to see that this is something that you guys are actively paying attention to. So why is mental health important? It's important because it facilitates your personal growth within yourself and your relationship with those outside of yourself, your family, your community, society. And specifically, it allows you to enjoy life, to cope with challenges that come up in your life, and to improve resilience. So basically have an immune system sort of in place for when life throws you emotionally tough events that will, ultimately eventually come up in some form or the other. And outside of yourself, it's really important to form those healthy relationships, to feel like you're a positive contributing member of your community, and to be able to really express your needs, and have those needs responded to in terms of your emotional self. So to put it kind of in the simplest way, here are kind of some prompts for you to consider. And I find this is a more helpful way to conceptualize mental health, as opposed to what it most commonly is portrayed as, like almost like a weakness, a bit stigmatized in the media, a bit not talked about. But basically, these are concrete examples that I feel are equivalent to accessing mental health. So why is it important for athletes to work out regularly and maintain a strict nutritional regime? Should athletes feel guilty or embarrassed for accessing a coach and a personal trainer? And for musicians and composers, why is it important for musicians to practice outside of performances? And should musicians feel guilty or embarrassed for attending a masterclass or for sending their instruments in for servicing or tuning? So I really encourage you guys to look at mental health as another domain of your physical health, as another domain of your career, even something to be optimized. For example, if you were playing sports or you were doing some sort of workplace activity and you injure your shoulder, the natural logical thing would be to get it checked out by a medical professional, maybe do some investigations, depending on how you're feeling, to make sure there's no like broken bones, no surgery needed for whatever reason. And then after that, you proceed to like pain medication, to physiotherapy, you recover the shoulder. The same thing goes for if something stressful happens in your life, if you go through stress, for whatever reason, loss of whatever form, bereavement, I think the logical thing is to seek assessment and then get physiotherapy, so to speak, of whatever appropriate source to address that. And this is actually really important because the alternative, or not doing so, leads to mental and physical illness. And so there's some statistics, these are all from Statistics Canada, a couple of years ago now. So, possibly since the pandemic, this has changed, but even before now, 1 in 5 Canadians in any given year experience mental illness. And the prevalence for this is 50% of Canadians aged 40 and below. And so the results or the consequences of this is that these people who have mental illness, on average, live 7 to 10 years shorter. Their lifespan is 7 to 10 years shorter compared to their age and sex matched peers in the population. And you would think that, okay, like maybe it was due to like unintentional accidental death or like because of risky behavior or like self-harm, maybe even suicide. But actually, majority of the morbidity and mortality in these 7 to 10 years that they're talking about is due to chronic disease, like heart disease, lung disease, metabolic disease. So not addressing your mental health has very well established, statistically established consequences for your lifespan and your physical health. And again, comparing this to other things like breast cancer, which is the most common type of cancer in females, is about 1 in 7 to 1 in 11, given your risk profile. That's like, we have screening programs for breast cancer. We have population-based advertising for these screening programs. We have so much education, so much resources. And yet, mental health for the general population, it's 1 in 5, 50% of those under 40, which is arguably like majority of the productive years of your life where you're like physically well. And it's not as talked about. So this is kind of really important to keep in your head. So then we've talked about mental health and the population. Unfortunately, there's also occupational associated hazards, mental health wise, for musicians and composers. I inserted a little cute photo of kitties here because I think that that's like a nice reminder. We're still trying to keep things like a safe environment. So if you guys need to like take a break or these statistics are kind of depressing and you want to like go grab a coffee or a tea, something, completely fine as well. So for musicians, talking about kind of occupational hazards, the common things for me at least that come to mind are like hearing loss, tendonitis, carpal tunnel. And these are things that can seriously affect the quality and the length of your career as musicians and composers, and things that you want to actively prevent against and also actively treat if like a mild syndrome of it comes up, right? On the mental health side, and these are also things that your organizers mentioned specifically in the email as well. So again, I can see that you guys are already aware of this, but on the mental health side, you have things like performance anxiety, rumination and burnout, and job and financial instability. And just to give some examples, I don't know why I chose the letter B, but there were so many people. So I said, well, they might as well be related somehow. They all start with the letter B, but you got Beethoven, he's got hearing loss and bipolar. You got Bruckner, he had heart disease and OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder. Billie Eilish, she had hypermobility, which has to do with like the joints and tendons, and depression. Beyonce, she's also talked about knee injury because of her tours, and also she's talked about depression. And in terms of the prevalence of mental illness among musicians, there was this Swedish survey a couple of years back, I guess more than a couple, in 2019 now, and by a major Swedish record, and they found that 73% of their independent musicians struggle with mental illness, and this was 80% aged 18 to 25. And for context, Sweden is the 4th happiest country in the world, according to the World Health Organization, and Canada ranked 15. And for those of you who are curious, Finland is first. So we can potentially infer that there's an increased risk of mental health or mental illness among people in the musical career compared to the general population. And I wanted to specifically, I guess, make concrete why these things happen so that it's not something that maybe you guys are kind of aware of, kind of have always suspected, but what is the proof behind the statement? Why you're not just kind of making this up. So the first thing, performance anxiety. So they've done studies on all these things. And the research term They use for performance anxiety as musical performance anxiety, MPA. And they actually note that MPA presents as a variety of physical symptoms differently in different people, including trigger point pain, muscle pain, social phobia. For some people who are more predisposed, it could present as depression, even eating disorders and panic attacks. And this was through studies where they surveyed many, many musicians about whether they've experienced anxiety, and if so, what are the symptoms they experience it as. They also noted that females are more likely to experience this than males, and that the people with depression potentially have an increased risk of these symptoms. And then also on the flip side, experiencing these symptoms over a long period of time increases your risk of mental illness, because if you can imagine, it's kind of discouraging to be waking up and trying to do your job and you're having like muscular pain, you're having fatigue, you're having changes in appetite. These are all kind of clusters of symptoms that overlap with mental illness conditions. And so if you're someone who performs a lot and just goes through a lot of periods of time where you have bouts of anxiety before performance or just bouts of nervousness, if these aren't managed properly, you can see how this increases your risk of developing like the cluster of symptoms that predisposes you to mental illness. In terms of rumination and burnout, again, they have done studies post-performance. And of course, like the best studies always test college and university students because they're always the ones to volunteer. But basically, they ask these poor college and university students, and they follow them for like a several day period after solo performances. These are music students, and they took their salivary cortisol levels. And they found that it was measurable that these cortisol levels are higher in your saliva for several days after the performance. And this is an indicator of activation of the system in your brain that regulates stress levels. And we know from a biological perspective, increased elevation of these stress levels over a long period of time increases your risk of mental illness and of chronic illness because of just increased levels of inflammation in the body. Generally, things more likely cause errors and lead to disease. Interestingly enough, they found that even though everyone's stress level, cortisol level in their saliva was slightly elevated after the performances, those who reported more positive performance-related thoughts had significantly lower cortisol output, or like inferring stress system activation, than those who had negative performance-related thoughts. So again, this is something that is something that we can mitigate, or something that you can manage to prevent that risk from building up over time. And then finally, the job and financial instability aspect has also been studied, by Stats Canada, by the Financial Consumer Agency, by very large bodies of work, that people who are under unstable employment conditions, whatever that may be, even if it's, you're very well reimbursed, but it's just uncertain when or where the next contract might be, they report lost sleep because of financial related thoughts or worries, poor overall perceived health, feeling like they're not healthy, which translates to chronic health issues like their blood pressure is a bit higher, they have a more tendency to get heart disease. And again, this leads to long-term chronic physical illness and chronic mental illness. So these are kind of specific to you guys, the aspects of your job that would make you slightly more at risk and more susceptible to mental illness, which is different from the general population. And I hope that I gave, some evidence, but not too dense, boring evidence that this has been studied, it's not made up. Like it's not just things that people tell you. Um, it's been established. So given this, at this point in the presentation, have I convinced you to address your mental health as a composer, musician, and human being? I really hope yes, but if not, I'm also okay if you're just here for cute animal photos. I mean, as long as it makes your day a bit brighter, that's okay as well. So take a moment to give that an answer. Okay. Perfect. Two people really want me to keep talking, so I I appreciate that. Um, all right, so we can definitely keep going. So at this point, I've kind of presented you guys some facts, presented you guys some differing, some suggestions on different perspectives you can look at mental health that is separate from mental illness. Um, and so now, how do you then take this information and do something about it? And yes, we have more cute animal photos. And these photos are all open domain. I did not steal them from artists. Public domain photos. Okay, so like I mentioned, I am, or I guess August introduced me, I am a doctor by training. So as a general practitioner or primary care physician, if you ask me, like, in the simplest way possible, I don't care about any of the details, I just need something to do. What are the basics of managing my health? I would tell you 30 minutes of moderate physical exercise daily, eat the rainbow in terms of whole, non-processed foods, and have regular sleep schedule. And that prevention is the key to maintaining health. But really, we don't have a lot of guidance when it comes to mental health. Like for physical health, I can point to here's the Exercise Council of Canada on like how many minutes of exercise and what types of exercise. Here's the Canada Food Pyramid, or I guess now it's the Canada Food Plate on what you should eat. Here's evidence why sleep is important for physical health, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't really have like, here's how many minutes you should meditate if you don't want to get depression, or, you know, here's things that you should, like how many minutes of time you should spend with your friends or family a week so that you don't feel lonely. Like we don't have guidelines like that. So these are kind of the three big categories I kind of sectioned off mental health into that I hope is simple, achievable, and I basically categorize them as reflection, connection, and self-compassion. And I'll basically be going over some basic action points you can do in each of these categories and the evidence behind these points. And specifically, all the evidence I'm going to be talking about from now on is the highest level that we consider in the scientific community. The lowest being like anecdotal, like I heard that someone else's mom's brother did this and then like they were cured of whatever. Like that's the lowest level of evidence. And the highest level, which is what I will be talking about, is randomized control trials where they randomly assign people into two groups, one being what they want to study, one being a control, and they look at the results. And then meta-analysis, which is where they gather a bunch of these randomized control trials and statistically calculate it and see what all of them say together, weighted by like their study size, the risk factors they considered, like canceling out age, gender, etc., other possible variables. So, like I mentioned, this is all very evidence-based. So the first thing, reflection. The simplest thing you can do to reflect more is to meditate and to do gratitude journaling. And these are very simple things that you can include in your life that will clinically increase your mental health. They have done a lot of studies, and like I said, randomized control trials where they have had a group of people meditate, and that has resulted in significant reduction of stress, of anxiety, of depression, It's even helped with substance use, addiction, and even people with mental illness, like people who already have depression. It's reduced relapse in future depressive episodes. And in terms of gratitude journaling, again, like randomized control trials where a group of people were randomly selected to write thankful notes to people around them or to people in their life versus people who kind of just journaled about emotionally significant events. They found that even months later, after they wrote these notes, they still felt their mental health was better than the group who did not write gratitude letters. So what is it that you do? Basically, for mindfulness meditation, you can look up any guided meditation narration. There's apps, there's YouTube videos, there's scripts that you can find online. You can do it for like, start with 10 seconds and then a minute and then 5 minutes, however long you want. And it can be as simple as like mindful breathing and as complicated as like visualizing different things in your life. It could even involve gratitude. And then gratitude journaling, the simplest form of that is just keep a journal or, have spare pieces of paper laying around. And once a day, you just write things that you're grateful for or like people you're grateful for. Or you can send a message to someone saying, oh, I'm grateful to have you in your life. Those simple actions have been studied and have been clinically associated with improving your mental health. The second thing is connection. And by connection, I mean really avoiding loneliness. Perhaps some of you have heard in recent years that this has also been highlighted as a public health issue. Governments have reported on the there was a United States Surgeon General 2023 report. I think the UK appointed some minister of loneliness or something like that. And that's because there have been public health studies that have indicated on a large scale that loneliness has severe impacts on our health. And people have even, or the data has even related it to smoking cigarettes. And they found things as loneliness can lead to premature dementia, obesity, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, suicidality. So again, loneliness is unhealthy. And so how do you combat loneliness? With connection. Reach out to your family or friends. You can perhaps send those gratitude messages to someone that you feel grateful for. Or if you want to just send one of your friends a funny GIF or GIF. Anything to make yourself feel less isolated is something significant that you're doing to improve your mental health. And that has, again, been proven. So don't feel like you're being dumb by being the first one to reach out to a friend to set a time to gather. It's something healthy that you're doing for yourself and for them. And then the third, which is kind of the most recent, in my opinion, wave of popular psychology or psychology that's psychiatry that's been acknowledged by the media and by society, people are slowly becoming aware of it, is self-compassion. It's really established itself as a theme in the past, I would say, decade. And a lot of new research has shown that self-compassion is a very important domain, and it is linked with improved mental health, decreased character traits that might predispose you to mental illness, like severe neuroticism, anxiety, stress, and self-compassion is defined as having mindfulness, self-kindness, and a sense of common humanity when considering yourself. So it's basically a combination of the previous skills, mindfulness, and gratitude towards humanity, and then self-kindness, just being kind to yourself. And on a biomedical level, how we believe this works is that when you practice, when you think about yourself and evaluate your actions in this way, it increases the levels of oxytocin, which is a hormone in your body that promotes bonding and closeness. It's the same hormone that's activated when mothers bond with your children, but it's activated toward yourself. So it decreases stress levels. It promotes you to basically love and accept yourself more. And people report that having more self-compassion goes hand in hand with general life contentment, which I think honestly is a good goal to aim for with mental health, just like generally content with your life. And again, I'd like to mention, like, while these seem to be kind of lofty, almost metaphorical themes, these are themes that have been studied in randomized controlled trials. They made questionnaires that have been validated that measured people's level of self-compassion, and then also looked at their mental health, their physical health, and this is the data that's come out from that. So basically, the last thing I want to mention, you can also measure your level of self-compassion if you would like. Again, it's a medically, psychologically validated domain, just like a questionnaire that would screen for depression or anxiety or like ADHD. It's probably, you can Google it and find it, but I'll also show you guys what it looks like later. I think it would be an interesting exercise if that's something you guys were interested in. So anyways, for now, I've kind of talked about all these broad concepts. And, you know, I think it's most effective to just put them in practice. And I do think we have a bit of time. So if we want to do like a short, maximum 5 minutes of a little meditative practice, and yes, I think these are either like sleeping sea lions. But they're depicting, I guess we could pretend they're meditating sea lions. But anyways, if you guys would like, we can vote on what kind of practice we can take a try at right now, or we can vote to skip this part if everyone's kind of not in the mood, or you're all in like a really busy public area and you don't feel like, you know, having that kind of minute right now. That's completely okay too. So to take a minute to vote for that. Also, let me know if there's any issues with the survey. If no one votes, then I'll also take that as a sign maybe we're not too interested in this activity, and we can also skip that as well.
I think I'm not getting so I have the poll thing on my phone and I'm not getting it. It's not turning over from the last
Oh no. Okay,
question, which I think is why we're getting no
that's okay.
response.
If you guys want, we can also put some suggestions in the comments of which one you guys would like to try. I guess it was going too well that all the polls worked on the first try every time, you know. I think this is probably the last one, or if not the second last one. So we basically made it most of the way through. Okay. It's okay if we kind of don't feel like it. I do have a meditative practice that I suggest I think would be helpful for everyone. So that one's on the next slide. And this is actually based off of an ancient Hawaiian practice that basically also reflects a lot of the self-compassion domains. And the concept of this practice is that whenever you're going through an emotionally difficult situation, when something's not gone your way, when you feel like you're rejected or betrayed, or you feel let down, you feel disappointment, you feel anger, frustration, whatever it is, that negative emotion that you want to process, it can be either in the moment, or if you just like don't have the resources in the moment, later on down the line, down later that day, that week, when you've had some time and you decide you're ready to look back upon it, you can say these words to yourself. The original activity, or I guess the original practice, is four phrases. It's I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. And I would just like to add in the middle, I forgive you. So I'm sorry, please forgive me, I forgive you, thank you, and I love you. And when you're saying this, it's really helpful to visualize that situation, yourself in that situation, how you're feeling, and basically your present self is talking to the version of yourself that was hurt, that felt hurt, and still feels hurt. And you're basically having a conversation with yourself where you're emotionally soothing yourself. Um, you're saying, I'm sorry that you were hurt. And at the same time, I'm sorry that I'm feeling so hurt. Please forgive me, for the fact that I'm feeling this way. I forgive you for this. Thank you for being here for me. And I love you. So this can be very emotionally cathartic practice when done with mindfulness, while acknowledging whichever strong emotion that you would be talking about in that moment. Okay, so I would say if you've taken away like nothing from this entire presentation and all the points about like the public health and like the domains of mental health, those are all kind of boring, and you're like, okay, what's one thing I want to do? I would say this is like the one thing that I would like you guys to try at some point in the next week, like once, to see how this works for you. And I think this practice could significantly like help you in the right situations. Okay, so we're approaching the end slowly, and this is kind of our last check-in. I guess maybe I'm not sure if this one will work either, but feel free to also drop a couple of words in the chat on how you're feeling now that we're almost at the end. Oh, and this one is working apparently, so that's good. I guess this is just that one. You feeling nice? Feeling enlightened? I'm glad that this has been helpful for some of you. So that's good. Um, and you're feeling gloomy. There has been some gloomy statistics, I do admit. I'm sorry to be the bearer of, those news. I hope I also at the same time gave you some like, actionable news. And also, think of the cute animals. Helps for me. Okay, so at this point, here are some slides that you guys can kind of take screen caps of. But I also pulled them up on my end, so I'll just kind of quickly go through them with screen share. But basically, this is like the compiled list of resources that I think is a great place to start and are very useful. And I guess now this is recorded too, so you guys can use that as a reference. And then some general tips on what makes a good counselor. Specifically, you need to like the person you're talking to, because that is the greatest predictor of your clinical outcomes. If you don't like or trust the person that you're working with, then unfortunately, you just won't feel emotionally safe with them. It just won't have the same effect. Because you need to have that trust in order to explore and reflect on yourself and your life. And then also avoid conflicts of interest, because it can get really complicated. So if the person you found is by random chance like also your friend or has other roles in your life, like they also counsel your partner or your family member, like it could feel nice and really convenient. Like maybe your sister introduced you to them because like they're her counselor and she also like they've been great for her. But it introduces like a level of like awareness for both you and the counselor that sometimes it even unconsciously it just biases your work together. So that's something to avoid. And then I'll also quickly go through like these are just screen caps of our website and I'll go through our services. Um, but basically, that's the presentation. But I want to actually go through the resources. So let me switch to my other screen I have open. I think it's this one. Okay, so of the resources I mentioned, going from the most urgent to not as urgent. So didn't really talk about mental illness, but basically for crisis situations, there are drop-in counseling clinics all across the GTA. If you Google CAMH drop-in counseling, you'll get one of the first search results will be this PDF where there's literally a list of services that are free, that are walk-in. They even offer meals sometimes, like there's details under each location. The caveat is that a lot of them only serve youths and young adults up to age 24. I think the oldest I found on this list was age 29. Sometimes also families with infants. So really to look to see if you're eligible for these walk-in services, but this could be very useful. So yeah, see, I straight up just Googled it and you can find it from Google. The second one is a virtual drop-in or virtual urgent care, again through CAMH. CAMH is like the mental health hospital that's part of the University Health Network. And they have everything from specialized outpatient services to like a psychiatric emerge. But basically, they have a virtual urgent care clinic that is not age restricted that you can also access if you're undergoing crises. And again, this you can Google this online and book straight directly online. In terms of websites, Mind Beacon is a really helpful website. It used to be funded by the provincial government during the pandemic. Now I don't think it's funded, but it still has some free for access services. But it has anything from guided programs online to live sessions and in-person assessments for counselors. These would likely be with a charge though. Anxiety Canada also has a great app called the Mindshift CBT app. It's completely free. It has a mood tracker. It has guided, narrated meditation videos. These websites all have like their little pop-up things. But anyways, this is also a really useful app that I suggest you guys look into. It's very low commitment. You can try out some of the activities on it. And if you don't like it or the aesthetics are not your style, then you can just, uninstall it. How to find a counselor. Basically, this is the website that I direct patients to. It's called Psychology Today. It has a US site and a Canadian site. Make sure you're on the Canadian site, and then you can literally search by city or even your postal code. And when you do, make sure you filter or you'll kind of be overwhelmed with options. But basically, you can filter by almost anything, by conditions, by characteristics of your therapist, whether it's physical or cultural, modality, and specifically make sure you can also filter by insurance and funding, but specifically, you might want to make sure that you click the sliding scale option. People who offer a sliding scale means that they are willing to adjust their pricing based on your income. And so that can make it much more accessible to people who have like unstable income or people who don't want to pay hundreds of dollars per session. And in terms of books, because some people I know kind of prefer books or just doing their own work online. Three things that I list on top of my head. is Mind Over Mood, which is a very popular cognitive behavioral therapy book. Cognitive behavioral therapy is like a solution-based or like behavior-based method of working on yourself to achieve the goal that you want to achieve in your life, not necessarily caring about like where that came from in your childhood or like exploring like, oh, that one time in grade 7 where you embarrassed yourself, etc. It's just like you want to get things done. You feel like there's a mental block for whatever reason. There's exercises in this book that can help you see if they help you overcome your mental or emotional blocks. If you are the type of person that does want to kind of explore a bit more into like what you were like in your childhood, what your like emotional mental landscape is like, you want to dive a little bit more deeper, self-exploration, identity exploration, you can look into more psychodynamic approaches, and also self-compassion is where you kind of learn to embrace like those memories. So this is a book by Kristen Neff, who is a psychologist that is kind of well known in the self-compassion domain. It's come out a while ago now, but I still find it's very useful. I recommend, and you can read it if you like. And then finally, this course by Yale Department of Psychology, The Science of Well-Being, is free, goes in detail about like the statistics that I talked about behind the practices that I mentioned, like gratitude journaling, mindfulness, self-compassion, and it has very useful homework, which is basically like guided exercises week to week, where you focus on specific things and practice specific skills. So you can do that too if you're interested. And when I mentioned like the self-compassion scales, it's literally a questionnaire that you can try. Again, it's scientifically validated. You can find it for free online. And it just looks like this. So, something else that you guys can try if you have some time. Does involve some math at the end, but you only have to do it once. And then finally, about us in the center, I guess self-plug at the end, I work as an OHIP covered physiotherapist, meaning that I am a primary physician, like a general practitioner. And so my services are covered as part of your OHIP, like your Ontario provincial healthcare coverage. There are two of us at the Malka Green Artists Health Center, me and Rebecca. Rebecca is also amazing. We have a selection of both short-term slots and long-term slots for people who are interested in getting counseling, talk therapy, psychotherapy, and you can access us at the center. In addition to mental health programs, there is a variety of services that were mentioned by August in the beginning, but also that you can look at further on our website. These are not OHIP covered, and you can see the fee schedule, but we do provide financial assistance. It's a very popular program, the Joyce Ann Sidmus Fund, which subsidizes a large portion of all your visits up to like almost $800 annually that you can apply for multiple times. So that's something that I encourage you guys to access the center and look into that as well. And we also host workshops once in a while that are open to everyone. Like there was one on narrative medicine, there's one on different types of services. We're even expanding to include music therapy as well. So yeah, really exciting things coming up for us at the center. And I think that officially ends the presentation. I kind of speed ran through all the different resources. We just made it to 3 o'clock. Apologies if I cut the questioning period short, but I'm open to take questions.
We might have a bit of what I would term shy composer disorder. It's a thing, but Yeah, if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question or pop a question in the chat. There's just a note here, Faye, from Shelly Ann. If you want to send me,
I can
if
send
you
you
send me
guys.
a list of the resources, I will find a permanent home for them somewhere on our website.
Yeah, I can literally just send you that slide with the collated list. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, and then I'll build it out from there, so
Oh,
that these can be easily accessible.
Trying to think of a question that I could ask here. There, August, did you have one?
You're trying to think of one, and then you just passed it right off to
Well,
me,
you
guys.
seem like you were gonna say something.
No. I don't have one off the top of my head. I think that covered a lot of ground, and hopefully, I mean, I guess, uh, are there's nothing like Artists Health Center in any other region or part of Canada, is there? Is it just a Toronto thing, or is there a way for folks outside of Toronto to access it? Would be one thing that comes to mind.
yeah, that's tough. I mean, I can't guarantee that there are none. Like, hopefully there are, but this is the one that I'm aware of since I trained in the like my residency fellowship in the GTA region with the University of Toronto, and this is the one that's connected to the University Health Network, all the academic downtown medical centers.
Right.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in for that one. So we are the only clinic that offers artist-centered healthcare services to artists and arts students and educators of all disciplines. We're the only one in Canada. There is one called Musicians Clinics of Canada, which is out in Hamilton. And the services that we provide, if they're online or even virtual, they do need, if it's OHIP covered, then they will need an OHIP, and they typically need to be residents in Ontario to access. So unfortunately, we hope to have a clinic out in BC or a clinic in Quebec. That's not something that we've heard of, unfortunately. And in the future, what we're really aiming to do is build a list of healthcare professionals, whether it's MDs or nurses or allied health that have experience and have skill sets in providing care to artists. And we're hoping to have that as a directory list that we can have on our website.
Oh, very cool. I mean, I would just jump in if that once that comes to fruition, please let us know so that we can note put it in our newsletter and amplify that to our membership and to the broader community.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, if we don't have any questions, Joseph, if you don't object, I think I just want to thank Dr. Jha for a really great presentation. I know this is like a huge topic and it's kind of impossible to cover everything, but I think you really hit on the key points specifically for musicians and composers. And I really appreciate you taking the time, and I really appreciate Shelly Ann for putting us together and for helping facilitate all of this. And hopefully it can be the start of something where our organizations can work together and complement one another to serve our communities. So thank you very much. Very grateful, and I want to thank everyone for coming.
It's our pleasure, and I'm really happy to have been invited for this. This was a lot of fun. So thank you guys as well.